Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. If you have questions for next week's Q&A, please get them in the comments below. Until then, let's get straight into it. All right, this is going to be a big one, my 10 favorite guitar solos. I thought about this all week and I decided to split it into two. 5 solos that I experienced as a developing musician that really shaped my idea of what a great guitar solo is, and then 5 solos that I just still love to this day. So we'll start with the 5 solos that I could listen to any day of the week. Tornado of Souls by Megadeth, the perfect metal guitar solo. No one ever has or ever will play a better metal solo in my opinion, and it is really testament to the genius of Marty Friedman and the way he builds a solo and he uses a solo to make the song better. It's also a solo that, you know, I've sat down to learn about 20 times in my life, and I get about halfway through and I just go, this guy's too good. Another one, which I would have to say, it's not as technical as someone like Marty, but there is a similar level of genius behind it, I think, is the guitar solo in Achilles' Last Stand. That is one of Jimmy Page's greatest solos of all time. You know, people talk about like the solo to Stairway to Heaven, a great solo, obviously, but to me, Achilles he just pulls it out of the bag. You know, Jimmy gets accused of being like a really sloppy player at times, or, you know, there's some clips and some bootlegs I've heard where he's having a rough night, but the solo on Achilles' Last Stand is just sounds like sheer willpower. You know, there's this great song and he's put this guitar tapestry inside it. So I absolutely love that one. Third one, which I think is it's the embodiment of swagger and charisma, is the guitar solo in Crying in the Rain, the John Sykes version anyway, from the 1987 album. It's just John throwing down, you know, it's like he's just going nuts on the guitar. There's everything that I love about his playing. The huge bends, the searing tone, the impossible fast runs, and just putting it all together and, like, you know, leaving nothing behind. So I really, really love that about John's playing. In terms of guitar players that I could listen to all day, Eric Johnson is definitely one of those, and the guitar solo in Venus Isle is probably my favorite solo that he plays. It's got the classic EJ mix of like a mixolydian and a natural minor kind of thing, and it's something that really, not in terms of his tone or his style or anything, but he's been a huge influence on the way I try to play and try to put solos together, and that one is the embodiment of everything I like about his playing, and it just makes me feel things. Most of these solos, actually, that I'm going to talk about, they just make me feel things, and that's what's really important. And one more to round this out, I could listen to George Lynch play guitar any day of the week, and I think my favorite Lynch solo is probably in the song In My Dreams. You know, it's just like such a punchy, catchy 80s metal song, and the solo in that one is just, yeah, it's the perfect guitar solo for that song, for that era. Contains all the cool Georgisms, you know, all the big stretches and the funky notes and the pinch harmonics, and that's another one that was a really big influence on me, but it's one that, even though I've learnt that solo, I'll never be able to play it as good as him, and whenever I hear it, it just floors me. You know, it's really, really a great guitar solo in a rock context, in my opinion. There's 5 solos I can listen to any day of the week. In terms of solos that had a big impact on me as a developing player, the first solo I ever learnt was a guitar solo in the song Still in Love with You by Thin Lizzy, the one that Scott Gorham plays. Brian Robertson gets a lot of the cred in that particular lineup of Lizzy, but I just love Scott's playing. He's so melodic, he's so tasty, he's almost like a sax player in the way that he leaves pauses in his phrasing, and, you know, he's just the embodiment of like 70s rock stardom to me. Following on from that, getting into Thin Lizzy, you know, I've talked about Scott, I've talked about John Sykes, who was in Thin Lizzy, Gary Moore, obviously, and he was a very big early influence. And the guitar solo in Out in the Fields was one that, when I heard it, it just made my, you know, all the hair on my arm stand up, and it gave me chills and it gave me goosebumps. And the way he constructs a solo in such a short period of time is really, really incredible. He's such an economical player, and I could name basically any Gary solo, and yeah, he gets the job done. Another solo that gets the job done that I heard when I was just getting into this band is the guitar solo in the song Limelight by Rush. And that's a solo to me that I've never ever thought about learning, because I don't want to know what Alex did in it, just because I love it so much. It's like, you know, from the first really long held note to the fast run in it, to the way he holds that note at the end, and live he runs it into an echo and it goes off. And yeah, that's a really, really beautiful guitar solo in my opinion, and one that I heard as a developing player that made me realize that it's not about how fast you can play. It's not about putting every trick you can put in there. It's about creating like a song within a song. And that was a very important lesson for me to learn, I think, at that stage in my teens when all I wanted to do was absolutely shred. So following on from that, I think somebody who definitely influenced that whole era of guitar solos, whether it was being an influence on Alex Lifeson, he's talked about it, Eddie Van Halen's talked about it, Yngwie's talked about it. It's the solo in the song In the Dead of Night by UK that's played by Alan Holdsworth. And it's very like proto Holdsworth. There's a lot of the things that Alan does really well, like the legato, the outside note choice, all the stylistic stuff, but it's not quite at the level as like, you know, something like when he was playing on City Nights or something. You can hear it's like this embryonic style that was just about to flourish and bloom. But I just love that song. I love the mood in there. I love all the modal stuff he's doing in it. It's like the most accessible fusion solo for a rock player to get into. And if I had to pick one more solo that had a huge impact on me growing up, I can't leave Stevie Ray out of this, because that guy just plays with so much conviction. And that was a big, big lesson that listening to him taught me. It's like, if you're just playing one note, you know, you gotta bear hug that thing, and you just got to embrace it, and you got to go the whole way with it. So the solo for me that comes to mind is a solo from the song Tightrope. It's just so gritty. It's just so honest and raw, and you know, no bullshit. And that's the thing I love about all of Stevie's soloing. Like, you can hear his fingertips being shredded off on those heavy gauge strings, and you can hear him grunting behind it. And it's just like, you know, when you're like 14 or 15, you hear it and you go, that's what a man sounds like when he plays guitar. And that's something that I always try to remind myself before I go and play a gig. It's like, hey man, it doesn't matter what you play, like as long as you play those notes with conviction. And I always think about that particular solo and kind of fall back on it. So yeah, hopefully that sort of sheds some light onto the sort of stuff I like when I hear a guitar player. If you guys are interested, why don't you let me know in the comments. Tell me your 5 or 10 favorite guitar solos and why you love all of them. Basically, all the songs that I mentioned all have amazing guitar sounds in them. Somebody that I didn't get to there was Robin Trower. His Bridge of Sighs era tone, I think, is incredible. He's just a guy that has tone. Ty Tabor is another one. All the King's X stuff, his guitar sounds are just phenomenal and out of this world. And on top of those guys, David Gilmour, of course, because I could have named like 10 Pink Floyd solos that are my favorite solos, and they could have been in there as well. So those guys just, you know, they have that thing that when you hear their guitar sound, you immediately know that it's them. They don't sound like anybody else, no matter what they're playing on. And Jeff Beck would be another guy in there as well, who I just love his tone. And I've seen Jeff live a couple of times. One, he was just playing through like backline Marshall DSLs. And then another time when he was playing through like a little Fender Champ, and it sounded pretty much the same each time. It just sounded like Jeff, you know? So yeah, all of those guys. And obviously your Gary Moore, your John Sykes, all that kind of stuff. In terms of modern players, whose tones do I absolutely love? That's a really good question. I think every time I plug into the Axe Effects, I hear a guitar sound that I love as well. So maybe that one qualifies. Andy Wood is somebody I've been listening to a little bit as well recently, who's just got the thing, you know, when he plays guitar. Marco Fanton is a guy that does a lot of Axe Effects videos. That his tone, he just has that thing, you know, that all those great players have. He makes me feel things. So little shout out to Marco. Go and check his stuff out if you like what I do. Why don't I use individual pedals, like a single pedal for delay, single pedal for reverb? I get that if you're unfamiliar with the whole concept of like a multi-effects or something like an Axe-Fx, that it would seem odd that I'm using one box for everything. The reason I pretty much use the Axe-Fx for everything is because I haven't found a reverb pedal that sounds better than the reverbs in the Axe. I haven't found a delay pedal where the delays sound better than the Axe-Fx. The Axe-Fx amp models sound better than most of my amps, you know, and it's just one of those things where, you know, it really is best in show. If it only did reverb, I think it'd be the best sounding reverb. If it only did delay, I'd still want one just for the delays. But I've definitely been there with the modular approach to pedal boards. I think it's a great one if you're a guy, you know, you want to put together a pedal board and you have a favorite delay pedal that you love the character of, and you have a favorite reverb and a favorite drive. That is absolutely awesome, and that's a great thing about pedal boards is you can build your own ideal multi-effect. But for me, what I want to do most of the time, it's amp distortion with a little bit of delay and a little bit of reverb, and the Axe-Fx lets me do that better than anything I've encountered in my life, whether it be pedals, whether it be, you know, plugins, whether it be just about anything else. So that's why I use it and why I personally don't gig or record with individual pedals anymore. But I do love them, and I still do own lots of them because, you know, like I've got an old Boss DM2 and it just sounds funky and it's just got character, and that's another thing that I want to have on hand. So if you're a guy who's totally into character tones with pedals and stuff like that, go for it. I think the Axe-Fx can do the character tone stuff, and I spend a lot of time dialing that in, and it's amazing, and it's also super convenient for me. So that's why I've chosen to go with it. Regarding a power conditioner, I don't use a power conditioner with my Axe-Fx 3. I know there's a bunch of people out there who do. I think if you are going to get a power conditioner, get one that has like surge protection and voltage regulation and all the stuff that is going to keep your gear safe. Most of the ones that are cheaper are just glorified power strips, and the Axe-Fx has built-in power filtering anyways, so it's kind of got a power conditioner built in. The only thing you might want to think about is having, like I said, some kind of thing that would stop bad stuff getting in there so you don't blow the power supply in it. But I haven't had any problems using mine in different countries, in different states, on like really kind of dodgy Dero stages. It's held up really, really well. So you probably don't need a power conditioner with your Axe-Fx, in my opinion. Rack preamps with a solid state power amp, that's actually a pretty good question. It's not something I've really tried a lot. When I have tried it, I haven't spent a whole bunch of time trying to dial it in. But that's probably a good idea for a video. Like maybe I'll shoot out the matrix with like the power section from my DSL and my Mesa 250 and see if I can get a particular preamp sounding pretty slamming on all of them. That would be pretty cool. I have done a comparison with the Axe-Fx going into the matrix with the power amp modeling on in the Axe-Fx and then into a power amp with power amp modeling off. You can go and find that video on my channel. The results are actually pretty surprising, but in terms of using it with a tube preamp, yeah, I should get around to doing a video about that. Another video I need to get around to doing is talking about the Les Paul toggle switch. It's really cool that you mentioned the middle position, because I actually use that middle position a lot when I'm gigging, if I'm playing on a twin humbucker guitar. A lot of the time, if I'm doing like edge of breakup stuff, I'll flip between the neck pickup and the middle position for rhythm stuff, and then I'll flick over to the bridge position for lead stuff, and I'll do the opposite, like play on the rhythm pickup, and rhythm pickup I mean the bridge pickup or the middle position, and then flip over to the neck for solos. So if I get around to it, that would be a really, really cool little video if I have time to do that. I will put it on my list of of videos. It grows longer and longer every day. Regarding the stuff that I used on Back to Zero, that was all recorded before I got an Axe-Fx. The reason I got an Axe-Fx is so that I could replicate some of those tones live, and that ended up being something that replaced all of my existing rig. But most of Back to Zero is my dual rectifier and my PRS SC245 and a Marshall 412 with V30s that we multi-mic'd. I've taken an IR of that cabinet and I've shared it. You can get basically identical results by using the Recto 1 red model in the Axe FX3, and I've put up a couple of presets with that. In terms of all the ambient effects and things like that, a lot of those were from an Eventide H9. I did a video with the H9 last week detailing some of those sounds, so you can go and watch that one as well. And then a lot of the stuff is just, you know, quad tracking, and then it's stuff that happened in post in the mix to make it sound awesome. So shout out to Troy Nababan for making that album sound amazing. And gigs coming up, yep, we are playing July 5th at the Rosemount Hotel, and then we are playing July 27th as part of the Perth Rocks Festival. You can come out and see that one, come and say hi. In terms of the Perth metal scene, I have no idea, because we don't really fit into that particular thing, I think. We're either, you know, the softest band on a really heavy bill with a bunch of metal bands, or we're the heaviest band on a bunch of like more just straight ahead rock and roll bands. So as far as I know, live music in Perth is pretty dead, which is a little bit sad. I feel like I've lived through the death of live music. You know, there's gigs that we do where we open for the DJs now, and it always used to be the other way around. So yeah, that kind of sucks. But having said that, you know, just the exposure that this YouTube channel gives to my music reaches more people every week than we could do playing a gig in Perth anyway. So that's why we probably don't play as much as we used to. It's all about impact nowadays anyway. But yeah, we have those shows coming up in July, and then a bunch of other stuff which I will announce later. Come out and say hi. It would be awesome to meet. It would be awesome to hang out. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you've got questions for next week, get them in the comments. Be excellent, and I will see you next week.